Good morning, everybody. Governor, you'll have not said anything about OMO. The borrowing program starts day after tomorrow. What will you be supporting, or what is the policy of supporting in case there isn't interest in the later government auctions? As well, you have said that you have seen potential output fall very sharply. From what to what?
To your first question, I think the intent is to provide sufficient liquidity to the markets. That means both short-term liquidity consistent with maintaining the call money rate close to the policy rate, and second, providing long-term increases in the balance sheet of the RBI consistent with what we believe is the appropriate rate of growth of credit in the economy. Now, our focus is on the rate of credit consistent with the inflation that we are looking at, as well as the economic growth that we anticipate. And to the extent that OMOs as well as foreign currency asset purchases are consistent with that over the next year, we will accommodate what we can. On the issue of I'm sorry, the second question was?
Potential growth, what was it?
Potential growth, and why don't I ask Dr. Urjit Patel to speak about that. As you know, estimating potential growth is a very difficult task.
With that important footnote that the governor just enunciated, by our calculations and using well-known techniques, in particular the Hodrick-Prescott one, the potential output has fallen from 8.5% in the fiscal year 2011-2012 to just below 6% presently. And this has been corroborated by some other research also. Thank you.
Let me add a footnote to the footnote, which is that my own sense of potential growth is it's a somewhat nebulous concept, in the sense that to some extent what supply constraints in the economy, for example, will have an effect on what we think is potential growth. To the extent that the supply constraints are alleviated through, for example, political action, that could enhance potential growth substantially in a relatively short time. So in that sense, I don't think that when we talk about potential growth, we're really talking about the structural growth prospects of the economy going forward, which could be quite different given our population, et cetera, provided the supply constraint issues are addressed.
But in the short term, if growth goes...
I think in the short term, you've heard Dr. Urjit Patel's sense.
Okay. Govardhan?
So Govardhan from the Economic Times. You mentioned that if inflation goes on the path as guided, there is no scope for rate hike in the future. At the same time, you mentioned about El Nino effect, and we have been witness to food prices playing spoilsport when it comes to inflation. Does that mean that if El Nino effect crimps food production and the inflation goes up, that you are back to rate increases? And then another factor was that, fiscal deficit numbers, whatever was given in the revised estimate, seemed to have been a kind of a mirage. It's completely way above the mark. So that also may play. So how do these two factors shape your interest rate outlook?
I think on food prices, first, it's not a given that El Nino will happen. Conditional on El Nino happening, it's not a given that food production plummets. If food production plummets, also, it's not given that inflation across the board will be high. It depends on which commodities are particularly affected, etc. So there are lots of uncertainties in this train of thought, and therefore I don't think we can at this point anticipate precisely what will happen. If food prices do increase, then there is this question of whether it's seen as a short-term transient increase, such as we saw with vegetable prices in December, which we decided to look through, or whether it's a more permanent increase, which could cause for example, second-round effects in wages and so on. So we'll have to take a call then if, first, the hypothetical event happens, and second, we see a more longer-term effect on inflation and not a transient effect. As far as the budget outlook goes, we have essentially a vote on account right now. Clearly, the new government will have to announce a full budget, and presumably that will take into account the need to meet the fiscal consolidation path. I think that a number of measures will have to be looked at, and I think we should wait for that before taking a call on whether the budget is credible or not.
Pradeep?
प्रदीप पंड्या CNBC आवाज से सर आपने जैसे अपने स्टेटमेंट में कहा कि बैंक लाइसेंस के लिए आप ईसी के परमिशन का इंतजार कर रहे हैं अब तक इलेक्शन कमीशन के साथ क्या आपकी कोई बातचीत हुई है क्या चर्चा अब तक हुई है अगर आप ये बताएं और दूसरे जो ऑन टैप और डिफरेंशिएटेड लाइसेंस की आपने चर्चा की क्या टाइम फ्रेम है उसके लिए
On the first issue of communication with the Election Commission, yes, they have asked us questions, we have responded, and at least as of now, I think they have the information that they need, and they have to make a decision, which could be a variety of, I mean, I don't want to forecast what their decision will be. Let me just say that this process has been taking place under its own steam. It is a regulatory process. It is not a governmental process. And the notion of asking the Election Commission was primarily because this is election season, and we didn't want the potential licensees to get their approvals under a cloud. And that is why we have asked the Election Commission for their opinion on whether we can, whether this is something that comes under the code of conduct. And let us wait and see what they say. But once and if they say there is no issue there, I think we would be in a position to announce the bank licenses fairly quickly after taking it to the committee of the Central Board. On the issue of differentiated bank licenses as well as on-tap licenses, the point is we should not be giving licenses every 10 years. And also, I think that, there is scope for having, people with partial licenses, for example, only for payments or only for lending, to come into the system. And this will allow people to develop banking capabilities even with relatively small size of operations, which will then allow them to maybe apply for full banking licenses down the line. So to facilitate entry, to expand entry, we need to look at both on-tap licenses, which is examine regularly applicants every few years, and second, have differentiated licenses. We already have a base document. We have to look at it much more closely. So I would suspect a framework in the next few months to develop, and then the process to start soon after. So, of course, it takes some time for people to apply. It takes some time for the applications to be vetted. What we've learned this time is how to do it carefully, how to do the vetting very carefully, and that will be part of the process going forward. I can't give you a date, but I will say quite soon that we hope to open the window. And it may be that we open the window first for differentiated licenses, for example, payment banks, and then move to opening the on-tap for universal banks down the line. But the hope is to make this an ongoing process.
One question at a time, Pradeep.
No, I think the idea to seek, I don't know whether it's permission or just to make sure the Election Commission was on board, was primarily to shield the announcement from controversy, so that the new licensees don't get dragged into the political process, which could happen quite easily. So it is. I've said earlier, perhaps abundant caution. It is something that Dr. Bimal Jalan suggested would be a good thing, and I respect his judgment and his advice a lot. And that was the basis on which I went forward to ask the Election Commission And let's see what they say.
Ritesh,
Governor Ritesh,
please don't speak without mic because it's very difficult for us to transcribe.
गवर्नर रितेश फ्रॉम जी बिजनेस सर, दो सवाल हैं. एक तो पहले इन्फ्लेशन को लेके है. जिस तरह से इन्फ्लेशन में गिरावट देखने को मिली, लेकिन कोर इन्फ्लेशन जो कोर सीपीआई है वो अभी भी कहीं ना कहीं स्टिकी है. एंड इन योर पॉलिसी आपने कहा है कि अपसाइड रिस्क अभी भी इन्फ्लेशन है. डज दैट गिव यू अ सेकंड थॉट ऑन होल्डिंग द रेट्स फर्स्ट? और दूसरा सवाल जो अपने पॉलिसी में कहा है 12वां पॉइंट 12th पॉइंट में जो आपने कहा कि लिक्विडिटी कंडीशंस हैज बीन टाइटन्ड एंड पार्टली ड्यू टू window dressing by banks and RBI will come up with measures. If you can just elaborate what kind of window dressing you mention about here and what kind of measures you propose.
Okay. On the first question, if we actually had second thoughts about the rate, we'd have moved the rate. We believe the rate is appropriately set right now, given our anticipation of events over the next few months. So the core CPI is sticky, but we've seen some sort of fall in the elements that we are worried about. For example, service inflation. There's been some reduction over time. So we will give this process some more time, the disinflationary process. We are not overly moved by the sort of fall in vegetable price inflation. But we are watching the disinflation that is happening in a number of important services, and let us wait to see how that moves. Of course, a number of factors will help in that, but as you said, there are some risks. Now, I want to say these risks are two-sided. We could get, for example, a budget that is a strong budget, and that could put us firmly on the fiscal consolidation path while shifting more of the focus towards investment rather than government consumption. That, for example, would be, I think, important for the economy. We could also see that some of the fears about food prices are not as strong as we currently, see discussed in the press. So let's wait and see. I think that it could be two-sided risk. Oil prices have stayed relatively calm. If geopolitical risks fall, you could see a reduction in oil prices. Vice versa, if geopolitical risks increase, you could see the reverse. So let's wait and see. Right now, policy is appropriately set.
Anirudh? One.
What was the second question? Remind me.
Sorry.
Window dressing, yes, good point. What happens towards the end of the year is banks are trying to, build a certain kind of balance sheet. For a variety of reasons. Different reasons are driving different banks. Some want to reduce the size of their risk-weighted assets so as to qualify for lower capital requirements. Others want to increase the size of their assets to meet government sort of performance requirements. It varies. But what you see is the distortions, these incentive distortions do affect a variety of markets. For example, the CD market became very tight starting in February itself. And so we took some preemptive actions to improve liquidity. But longer term, we don't think that the RBI should be in the business of bailing out the banking system with infusions of liquidity when the banking system itself is creating its own problem. And so we have to change the incentive structure. And we're thinking about a variety of ways. We will discuss with the bankers how we can better improve liquidity at the year end and not come to this pass where banks aren't lending to each other in order to maintain the balance sheets that they want. The year end should not be a time for anything special to happen. It should be smooth.
Governor, good morning. Anirudh here from ET Now. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, in terms of the hypothetical situation that you've mentioned in the macro report of not getting a stable government. So just want to understand your views in terms of if that eventuality does happen, what kind of concerns would emerge and what kind of challenges would emerge for policy setting. And secondly, in terms of the recent issue of United Bank of India, there was a very key issue which had cropped up in terms of the corporate governance issues at the bank. I just want to understand, firstly, what is the RBI probe into that found out, and what's the way forward in a case like this?
Let me defer the question on United Bank to Dr. Chakravarti. On the issue of new government being, not stable, I mean, clearly the issue is that markets right now are anticipating a stable government and rapid policy actions. And to the extent markets are disappointed, it will reflect on stock markets, perhaps on bond markets, perhaps on exchange markets. We have to be prepared for some turmoil. At the same time, I believe that even if the government is not a necessarily a stable one, provided any new structure shows the appropriate concerns about the economy, about the fiscal, and so on, I would suspect that after an initial bout of turmoil, there might be a reassessment which may be more positive. But let's wait and see. What we have to do is be prepared for what eventualities happen. And, I've said before, the better the balance sheet we build for the country, the more prepared we will be. And you could see, for example, the measure, proposing that new investment will be at the longer end maturities in the bond markets rather than the short end maturities as an attempt to prepare our way to a better balance sheet as we go along. And it's a mild gesture respecting the rights of investors, but in a sense nudging them towards the longer end.
See, so far as United Bank of India is concerned, let me say that it is neither a shock and a surprise to Reserve Bank of India, and it should not be to media. You see, we have not conducted any probe. It is the bank chairperson written a letter to the governor as well as the finance minister that in my bank, accounts are not classified as NPA, please go for a forensic audit. So we chartered an forensic audit, and the conclusions are found to be valid, that yes, the banks were not, their accounts were not classified as NPA. Now, whether it is because of technology, but this is nothing new. For the last 3 years, bank chairmen are saying, and even note to the account, because NPS has gone up because of the system-generated NPS. And I have said many times, there cannot be system-generated NPA. NPA is generated in the bank books by the borrowers. The computer never generates the NPA, so it was known. Second thing, even United Bank's loss. What we are highlighting, it is not only because of NPA. 625 crores pension provision has not been provided. Now, the issue is that is also not provided in many other banks, and which is available if you go through the disclosure which is available in the bank's balance sheets. Now, these all issues points towards the corporate governance. We have written to Government of India to take a set of steps for improving the corporate governance, and it is not only for United Bank of India, for the banking system as a whole. But we are not unnecessarily part of for one particular bank, United Bank. It is because of certain initiative by the bank management that we had to intervene, and this we have got. But we are definitely worried about overall how the system is functioning, and we are in dialogue with the government to improve the situation.
Please don't speak without mic.
So Gopika here from CNBC. Is it in this context that the RBI has sought the government's stake in public sector banks to be reduced going forward? Is that a part of the recommendations on corporate governance practices?
No, you see, our view is very clear. The performance is ownership neutral. It is the quality of management and the autonomy. What we are saying, that if the government ownership can ensure the autonomy in the banks, give the management quality it can maintain, there is no need. But if there is a constraint on that, we may have to look forward. The government may look forward. Second thing, there is an issue of budgetary constraint. The type of capital which the public sector banks, we have not said, and we don't believe that performance is, ownership affects the performance of the banks. That's absolutely not there. But if the government finds it certain limitations, they may consider other options.
Governor, you also...
Yes.
You also mentioned that you are open to looking at bank mergers, although you will ensure that stability is maintained. Is there a roadmap that you have in mind that Reserve Bank has already set its mind on which banks to be merged going forward?
No, absolutely not. And I think that would be a bad idea. I think it's better that the banks themselves voluntarily decide where most value could be created if they merge. All I'm saying is that we're open and there is room for both bigger banks as well as smaller banks. So what we're saying is that we'd be happy to consider if banks decide on doing that. Let me also take this opportunity to say this is Dr. Chakravarti's last press conference. And we are very grateful for the tremendous services he has done for the Reserve Bank over the time that he has been Deputy Governor. Thank you.
Subhashri.
Governor, this is Subhashri from Reuters. First question is basically about, can you give us an elaboration about what is the roadmap for implementing the Urjit Patel report, committee report, specifically on the inflation targeting? And secondly, sir, as you mentioned that you want banks to borrow long-term from RBI and not short-term. And in that sense, you have reduced the overnight repo and increased the term repo window. But what happens to actually attaining the money supply target, which will eventually be helping banks to give loans and helping deposits mobilization and the government borrowing program and all together, sir?
Well, let me start backwards. Money supply target will be determined by what we expect credit growth and inflation to be, consistent with the growth of the economy as well as the inflation we have in mind. And we will adjust our balance sheet to keep that in mind. Of course, there are two ways of adjusting the balance sheet. Actually, three ways. One, we can provide short-term liquidity. My sense is we provide short-term liquidity for short-term needs. There's also longer-term liquidity for longer-term credit growth, and that can be effectively provided by increasing the size of our net domestic assets, open market operations, as well as our net foreign assets, which is currency purchases. Some combination will happen over time. I can't tell you the precise combination, but I envisage some combination will actually happen. On the implementation of the Urjit Patel Committee report, as I said, we've already done a number of things. On the precise structures of, for example, Monetary Policy Committee, etc., those are issues that have to be discussed with the government. First, of course, we have to spend a little more time laying out what proposals we want to take to the government internally. Once we do that, we will then send a set of possible suggestions to the government, including on the policy, Monetary Policy Committee structure, if we believe that's the way to go, as well as on the process of setting inflation objectives, etc. Whether we move to a specific target, when we move, all that remains to be discussed. I'm happy right now that these issues are being discussed in the public, by the press, and so on. I think over time, as people feel more comfortable, it will also be more appropriate for us to move faster at that point. But right now, I think we're in the process of putting together what we need to put together, and eventually we will approach the government.
So, Bijoy from Cogensis here. One of the things that you have mentioned is the re-repo of government securities. Is that something that you expect to lead to also the term money curve in the long run? Is that one of the thoughts that you have in mind when you think about re-repoing? Also, on the on-tap licensing and the differentiated licensing, is it prudent for you to, at this point of time, when you're still in the process of issuing the next set of bank licenses, to come up with this? Because there'll be a lot of people who will miss out on the bus and they'll kind of feel a little left out because they probably would have wanted a payment bank or, a differentiated bank rather than, a full universal bank. So just wanted your thoughts on both these issues.
So the idea of rehypothecation typically works not so much with term repos, but reverse repos. When somebody is lent us money and suddenly feels that they have a squeeze on their reserves, they want to re-lend to somebody else, rehypothecation allows that. So as we move to term reverse repos, this will be a helpful thing. And we're exploring it. We think we can do it without much risk. Of course, during the financial crisis, there was rehypothecation, and that created problems because nobody knew who it was hypothecated to. We can control that process, we believe, and once we feel satisfied, there's some internal discussion on how to do it. we will move ahead. On the issue of bank license, sorry.
Is it something that you think could lead to an interbank term money kind
Yes,
of market
yes,
in the long run?
The idea in all this is to start from the very short end and create longer and longer term money markets. And we already have a reasonably liquid term repo facility. Once we bring all this into play, I think it will help the money markets quite a bit. On the issue of bank licenses, look, I mean, the idea here is that we have a lot of applicants, and what we want to, once we give the set of bank license, that there may be some applicants who are more suited or qualified for a different kind of license. And so we want to say, look, the possibility is opening up, and, we'll get more people there. The other thing I see it is as sort of I wouldn't say minor league, but a smaller playing field where people prove themselves and then can qualify for the bigger playing field. Show that you can do this kind of lending or that kind of payment, and then build trust, and then you can qualify for more. The point we want to make is that really a bank license in this country is a measure of trust. And you have to deserve that trust. And so we want to ensure that people who can build that trust get the opportunity to get those licenses.
Should we take a question from outside?
Sure.
We'll take a question from outside. Shaima?
Sure. Participants connected to the audio bridge, if you have any question, you may press star and 1. We'll take the question from the line of Manju from Financial Chronicle. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
You have allowed FIIs to hedge their currency risk. Are you trying to curtail the NDF market?
Let Mr. Khan answer that. The question is, are we trying to curb the NDF market by allowing FIIs to hedge some of their currency risk?
The NDF market?
Yeah.
No, in the policy, as Governor was mentioning in his initial remarks, what we are trying to do is to create more facilities for onshore hedging. One is up to $250,000. We are proposing that people can hedge without any documentation requirement. So this is one effort to make the onshore hedging facility easy. Similarly, for FIIs, some of them we know try to hedge in NDF market, and this facility of up to 1 year coupon flows, which is a near-term requirement, it also will help in facilitating them in hedging in the domestic forex market. Similarly, we have also in dialogue with SEBI for allowing FIIs to get into currency futures market. So that's the approach.
So I think the idea is this is determined by improving the hedging environment for foreign investors in India, not necessarily to combat the NDF market, but primarily to improve the environment in India.
Next question. Shaima?
Thank you. We'll take the next question from the line of Gautam Chakravarti from Ticker News. Please go ahead.
Just wanted to check on yesterday the finance minister said that we would probably add another 25 billion to our FX reserves, which means probably the money which has come through the FCNRB route, this thing. Wanted to understand the impact of it on the reserve money and consequently the RBI policy as a result of that.
Well, we have taken into account the effect of the FCNRB that we added to reserves. Remember that that's offset somewhat by the amount we give the oil marketing companies to buy the oil. Of course, as of today, they have acquired all that they need to pay us back, and that those payments will come through in April, continuing perhaps into May also. But they've come through in March, which explains some of the accretion to reserves we've had, but will go through April and May. I think that basically sums up what he said.
So should we assume that it has been netted off more or less?
No, I don't know what you mean by netted off. I think what you should assume is that we've taken into account the expansion in our foreign currency assets while determining the overall liquidity that we expand for the market. Remember in the past few years that there was very little expansion in foreign currency assets, so most of the expansion came through net domestic assets. Now I think, given what has happened so far, there will be a more balanced expansion.
Thank you.
Next one.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Joel Rubello from Mint. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to check, your plans on the forex reserves. We've seen a lot of inflows in the market. The rupee is now stable, and we're doing better than other countries. I just wanted to understand what's the plan in terms of the reserves. There are some suggestions, for example, that the RBI should in fact look to buy the dollar in the market and look to smoothen out the inflows and help our exporters in a way. Just wanted your comment on that, sir.
I don't think we are trying to establish any level in the market. I think what we do is try and attempt to keep the exchange rate from becoming overly volatile. That will continue to be our policy.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take it back, Shaima. One last question from this room, Olga.
Yesterday, the BJP spokesperson had said that they didn't think there was a need for new bank licenses. So, do you see some problems going ahead?
Not really. I mean, I think one should respect all the opinions that are expressed. But this is a process that has been certainly initiated by the finance minister in 2011, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, but then has been taken up by the Reserve Bank on its own since then. All regulatory processes have to come to an end. They can't be indefinite. And the natural end for this, let me remind people, when I came in as governor, I said we'll appoint the Bimal Jalan committee, and I hope to have the new licenses announced by January. What happened was the requirements of due diligence. I also at that time had said that I hope this would be one of the cleanest processes we had initiated. The requirements of due diligence took a little longer. Getting the replies from the various investigative agencies took a little longer, which is why the Jalan Committee gave us the report on February 25th. Since then, we have had the internal process looking at those licenses once again by the governor and the deputy governors, and trying to understand what makes sense. So all this has taken time and spilled over into election season. But this is not in any way a political process. It is an economic and regulatory process, and therefore should be seen as distant and different. And therefore, while different political parties, etc., may have views, we have to undertake what we have to undertake.
Sir. Ma'am.
One minute.
Ma'am.
I think the lady there has been having her hand up.
Saloni?
So, Shefali Anand with the Wall Street Journal. One quick question on foreign banks. What is holding them back from going for subsidiarization? And are you having discussions to encourage them?
Well, I think a number of factors. Some of them don't really, at this point, see a big benefit from increasing their branches, which is one of the benefits of subsidiarization that we've suggested. There will be others, such as national treatment on a number of dimensions. But clearly, unlike, some of our commentators who feared we were giving away the house by allowing this, the foreign banks don't see it as appetizing. Some of them are worried about the greater priority sector obligations that come with that. Going forward, we will have to take a view at some point. Clearly, we'll, separately from the foreign banks, the intent is to make priority sector norms more effective. The Nachiket More Committee has given a number of recommendations. We'll explore that and then take it up as we go. But at some point, this does become a regulatory issue. that in order to ensure banking sector stability, we need our large entities to be fully responsive to regulations here. And therefore, at some point, if the carrot does not work, we may need to push a little harder, as some other jurisdictions across the world have done. But before that, let us first address some of the concerns that people have, not just in the foreign banks but elsewhere, and see if this becomes a more attractive voluntary move. Some foreign banks have suggested there's some distance along the way in making up their mind. Since we didn't set a date for this, and since there are some other issues we are working on right now, we will come back to it once we can clarify.
Governor, just one final question on
Last.
SLR. Sir, when you joined in September last year, you mentioned about easing of SLR norms. Nachiket Moore panel has also recommended, a partial easing. What's your sense? I mean, have you, do you have the time frame in mind as to when do you want to ease the SLR norms and to what extent?
I think we will start on that process as soon as we are confident that the fiscal consolidation path will continue with a new government. As soon as we are confident, and I want to emphasize, we see SLR change as something that is needed from reducing the distortions to credit in this country rather than as a monetary measure. So we will embark on that path once we are fairly confident that fiscal consolidation will continue. For now, of course, there's some uncertainty about the shape of the next government, etc. So until that is clarified, it would be premature to embark on that path. But yes, once we are sure that fiscal consolidation will happen, I think we can reduce the demand on the banks to hold SLRs to make it more consistent with what is required from a liquidity perspective. So another aspect we will be exploring is how this fits in with Basel liquidity norms, and to make whatever SLR holdings are available with the banks more capable of meeting the liquidity requirements that Basel requires.
So would you, one question, sir. So one question on the black money in the system, sir. So here, here.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, one last question to you.
Bankers meeting.
So one last question to you, sir.
Please keep sitting till the governor leaves with his team.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Can I ask one question on the black money in the system, sir? So here.
Thank you.
So you go as a team.